Welcome to the Enterprise Excellence Podcast, where we explore how to engage and align everyone in an organisation to execute continuous improvement and innovation. This show brings you insights from global experts and practitioners who share their journeys in creating cultures of excellence to deliver sustainable results and a better future.
Welcome to the Enterprise Excellence Podcast and Community. It is such a pleasure to have Mr. Gary Stewart back on the show with us today. This again is part of a community meeting where Gary's going to go deeper into key questions that the community has provided us on these topics of excellence in organisations. Let's get into the show. Gary, thanks so much for joining us again. Let's get going. So everyone, welcome to the event. I'm really looking forward to this conversation further with Gary today. Such an important topic. And Gary, thanks again for sparing your time, mate. I really appreciate it. Everyone, we had the talk last month in the community. And in that talk, we were going through the system, the whole piece here, and exploring with Gary, where Australia's at on this curve, the perfect line, the two master systems, the fact that we're sort of in this decline at the minute, just to get the basics right up to a position of quality. But then we spoke a lot about innovation and the importance of innovation going forward, both to really help countries and businesses go to a high level. And today, everyone's given me a few questions already, and we're going to unpack those questions. And I'll share back to the model here at the right times. But let's get into it. So, Gary, mate, do you mind sharing for us a bit deeper on one of the questions that came through? Can you explain what effective innovation is versus efficiency innovation and provide some examples of this? I know it's what you mentioned really got lost back when that changed with Keating back in 1994.
Sorry, I just turned the air conditioner off. Look, the whole thing about effectiveness innovation. Effectiveness is a term that came from a Japanese word. So in English, you can probably swap that for what they call growth innovation. But the truth is that effectiveness is the right thing because it's a yin and yang thing. So effectiveness and efficiency are yin and yang, which in the Japanese. So the difference between effectiveness and efficiency is essentially customer focus and producer focus. So effectiveness is customer focus. Efficiency is producer focus, because in reality, the customer doesn't care if you're efficient or not. The customer cares whether you're effective or not, whether you're solving their problem or not. So you can think of it as effectiveness innovation. You can think of it as things like product market fit versus TPS. So TPS and product market fit are the two parts of it. You can also think of it as revenue and profit versus working capital and cash flow. So TPS started in Toyota, was really accelerated because when they came out of the bankruptcy in 1950, they had no cash. So the first task for them was reduce all work in progress inventory, reduce the timeline, and this is Ono's quote, right? Reduce the timeline between buying something and getting the money from the customer. So that's what drove TPS. It's about working capital and cash flow. Effectiveness innovation is more about revenue and profit growth. So let me just talk about an example of that, and I talked this idea about why you can't focus on efficiency innovation because it ends up destroying the effectiveness of every system in the company, and therefore the total cost of the total system rises even though the piece price is falling. So let me use a case study, and I'll go through that. I've got two case studies. So the first one is I went into a plant and I asked the production manager, "What's your efficiency?" And he said 103%. So if you understand anything about systems, you know that something's drastically wrong because no system can be more than 100%. So you know he's using a relative benchmark. So what he's doing to get that 103, HR is responsible for absenteeism. So we'll take that out of the measure. Waiting for parts, well, that's logistics, not getting them here on time, so that's not my problem, so take that out. So he's taking all sorts of things out of the measure, measuring what he can control and saying that's 103%. So then what I did was we do in the Toyota group, we do what's called a gross efficiency, so an absolute benchmark. Understand an absolute benchmark as what can you do in 8 hours? So if I have 125 people, by 8 hours, I've got 1,000 hours of available work. How many of those hours are the people working right first time for the customer? So when we did that calculation, it came out a bit over 30, but for mental maths, I'll just talk about 30%. So the gross efficiency is 30%, but you can't run a business on gross efficiency. So you need to add back some of the normal inefficiency to support it. So you don't want no meetings. You don't want no training. You can't have zero absenteeism. So you normally would add back between 10 and 20%. And just for mental maths, let's just add back 20%. So now we've got 30% gross efficiency plus 20% allowable inefficiency. So now we have 50% gross inefficiency. Now remember, the production manager is saying 103%. The reality is it's 50%. So he's been misleading the senior management for however many years because he's gaming the system. I'm going to talk about gaming the system more as we go. This is why you never use a relative benchmark, because it allows people to game the system, right? So the reason we use things like the gross efficiency is there's nowhere to hide. When you use a gross measure, an absolute benchmark, there's nowhere for people to hide things. Things become visible. So this is what we call Campbell's Law, and you can Google this. I'm not going to explain it to you, but basically it talks about if you set a target and the target is manipulatable, the system will be gamed. The person will deceive themselves. The production manager is doing self-deception, 103%. The world is doing well. But he's also deceiving all the management as to what's actually going on and what reality is. Reality is the productivity is half. He's telling them that it's the whole. So now with the gross efficiency, we can now turn that into a gross analysis of the P&L. Remember, a P&L is left-hand side, we buy things in, the right-hand side, we get money back from the customer. So take the labor. We know that 50% of the total cost of labor is waste to gross inefficiency. So now we take the money we get back from the customer and divide it into two boxes, a good box and a rubbish bin. So we put 50% of the wages cost in the good bin, 50% in the rubbish bin. And you do that for every item so buying in electricity, buying in all sorts of things, everything you buy in, you do the same analysis in the customer bin. It either goes in the good bin or the rubbish bin. When we did that for this company, it was about 35% of the P&L is being thrown in the rubbish bin. So this company is not making money, and I'm saying to them, no, sorry, you're enormously profitable. You're just throwing it all in the rubbish bin. And they don't understand at all. So this is why you can't use relative benchmarks. Same thing. So they're focusing on efficiency and they're destroying the effectiveness of the business at the same time. So let me give you a better case study that'll sort of add the two things together. And this is a microbiology company. This company is minus 4.8 or 4.9. So the grave has been dug and the tombstone is prepared. These young people, and they're mostly young women, microbiology, PhDs, honours students, they know this stuff like anything, but they have no idea about systems. So the first thing I did to them is said, show me what your system would look like without any problems, errors, delays, and frustrations. In other words, what we call machine time. So the part's ready to go out the door. So think of it like a product. The product is ready to go out the door. What is the step before that? And what is the machine time, the minimum time that you have to take to do that? And then go the next one, the next one, the next one. And you take this right back along the customer line. So it took them a couple of weeks, but it turned out that the system with no problems, errors, delays, and frustrations in it would be 26 weeks. So then I said to them, so now tell me, go back for the last 10 years, tell me what the average project took. And that was 116 weeks.
Mm.
So now we know that there are 90 weeks worth of problems, errors, delays, and frustrations in the system. Now that shocked them, of course, because that's the problem. That's what the problem is in their company. Why they're at 4.8 is because they've got 90 weeks worth of problems in the system. So
Mm.
now all I did was I said, so show me how the system fails. Go back to the Ishikawa diagram that we did with the customer line. This is the perfect system. Tell me how it fails. So I taught them. So what do I know about microbiology? I know nothing. Right? They are the subject matter experts. What do they know about systems? Nothing. So again, the yin yang thing, complementary but opposed parts of the same whole. So I teach them how systems fail. Then I say, so tell me how yours fails. And then, so if you can imagine this thing, so this Ishikawa diagram is about, let's say 2 meters high and about 4 meters long. And it's covered in post-it notes. So the first thing I said, once they'd finished that, I said, so tell me what the biggest problems are. Change them to red ones. Now just remove, while I'm not there, because I'm a consultant, so I'm going in and out. While I'm not here, just remove the red ones. Fix the problems as you're using what I've taught you. So that's what they did. The next time I come back and they say, so what do we do now? Well, you just do the next series problems. Change them to red, remove red. 3 years later, they've got it down to 26 weeks. Now you might say,
Mm.
hang on, it's 26 weeks and now they're at 26, so they're perfect. No, you see, because they're fixing, this is microbiology, so they're not all process problems, they're science problems. So in truth, that 90 weeks was about half process and half science problems. So what they've done is they've been fixing science problems. They're not just fixing process, which is efficiency innovation, they're fixing the whole science. So they're shortening that there are problems in microbiology and science that no one's ever solved. And these young people have solved these problems. So now the pure time, the machine time is 16 weeks. Right? So at 26 weeks, they still have 10 weeks worth of problems, errors, delays, and frustrations in the system, but they fixed the science problems. So this is an example of fixing both. They're doing about half of it is just fixing the process, the efficiency stuff, and half of it is fixing the science, which is the effectiveness stuff. So if you think about it, the gross efficiency is being fixed in their system by doing two things at once, the two parts. So the effectiveness innovation is about the profit, the revenue. So you can imagine if you take 90 weeks worth of problems, errors, and delays out of the system, can you and that translated between the two original graphics, that translated to about 85% of the steps in the process being removed completely, whether it was by efficiency or by removing the science. And if you think about, so what do you think removing 85% of the steps in the process did to the total cost of the total system? So they went from huge losses to huge profit, huge revenue increases, and because they're now the only one in the world who can solve these science problems.
Mm.
They're now getting customers coming to them because they've solved the science problems. So
Yeah.
that's an example of effectiveness and efficiency.
It's massive, Gary. And I guess too, competitively then from the effective innovation side too, they're creating a competitive advantage there, which allows them to grow more and win more sales and get more growth
Well,
at
not
the
just
top end.
competitive advantage. They're all patented. So
Mm.
they've now got a completely new revenue stream of patents.
Mm.
They're getting royalties from all around the world for solving these problems.
Yeah, wow, that's great. Gary, you mentioned in that example there, one question that came from the group was around the absolute benchmark. And they'll after what is the difference there? You know, what is the difference between what is an absolute benchmark and what's the difference between something that is not that, like just a target and a measure? And can you provide some examples that you've seen companies do to create absolute benchmarks so they can keep improving?
Well, the best example of an absolute benchmark was Toyota in around 1960. So there's an internal decision to be number one in the world, and then about 5 or 6 years later, that became a public knowledge. So there's a bit of confusion about when the number one in the world came out, but around 1960, they set that target, and of course, you're either going towards it or you're not. So that you can't hide the fact that you're not going towards number one. Nobody inside the company can hide it. I've seen companies that want to be, let's say, in the top 10. They will decide we want to be in the top 10 in innovation rankings. So they measure themselves, am I in the top 10? If not, then, why are we not in the top 10? So the target is causing you to ask questions, why not? So in some companies and in some countries, they choose to be number one in the industry or number one in the country. Some companies choose things like to be in the top three. I want to be a top three in my industry. Let me use an example of what is a bad one as well. So the perfect line is actually a good one because it says no problems, problems, errors, delays, and frustrations. As long as you can make sure that no one can game that system, because as you realize, if I say no problems, errors, delays, and frustrations, then people can hide things. So the problem is that if you use something like the perfect line, you've just got to make sure that you don't allow someone to game the system. So a bad example, for example, is I've seen a company they don't want any less than 5% profit in any year. And this is a really good example of why you should never use relative benchmarks. So this is a company that called me in, new CEO, new finance manager, and the company's in really bad trouble. They are way down in the death spiral. And they were trying to turn the company around, but the employees weren't having anything to do with it. So I sat down with the employees and said, so why don't you believe this company's in trouble? And there was a whole lot of answers, some good answers, some were just, thought bubbles. But one person said to me, well, the old CEO, he used to turn up in a brand new car every year, right? And not a bottom of the line, a very top of the line car every year. And because he was turning up in the new car every year, they all thought, well, we must be doing okay. So I went back to the new CFO and said, what the hell's going on? If you're so bad, how's this guy buying new cars every year? So what we did was we reconstructed the balance sheet, the P&L, and the cash flow for the last 5 years. And it became completely obvious that this guy was stripping the balance sheet to make the P&L look good. So what I sat down with the new accountant manager, finance manager, and we reconstructed it back to take out all of the internal transactions that are unnecessary between the balance sheet, the P&L, and the cash flow. And it showed that the company at an operating loss level was really bad. And I mean really bad. And so what had happened is this guy had stripped the balance sheet. There was no money left, so he left. And of course, the finance manager went with him, and the new people are struggling. So I then had to do an explanation of how the balance sheet, profit and loss, and P&L, balance sheet, cash flow, and P&L work with the employees very simply, and explain to them that what had happened was he was getting new cars because he was stripping the money out of the balance sheet. You weren't profitable at all. So we showed them the numbers, and that was what turned them around. And this is a perfect example of why you never allow people to use relative benchmarks, because he was just gaming the system. This is a perfect example of Campbell's law. Self-deception. He's looking good because, on his resume, he's declaring profits every year. Zero depreciation. He never bought any new machines while he was there because depreciation would make the P&L look worse. And so now there's new CEOs come in and the new finance manager, and there's no new equipment. All of it's old technology, and they don't have any money. And that's, This is the sort of stuff that really annoys me. But anyway, so
Yeah.
rather than worrying too much about an absolute benchmark, the point is that you need to choose a benchmark that either can't be gamed, like number one in the world, or something like the gross efficiency. You can't game it because it says there's 125 people by 8 hours. You can't game the system. So whatever you do, you've got to make it so that it can't be gamed, because that's what will happen. If you set a target, somebody will try and game the system. So the other thing that we do in the Toyota group is you make all of the targets visible so that any gaming gets exposed, and therefore gaming doesn't happen. Well, people try it. I mean, even in Toyota, people try gaming the system, but eventually the problem for them is that it gets exposed.
Mm.
And that's the key point. The key point is if you can't expose it, so this comes back to risk management, right? So the severity, the probability, and the ability to detect. If you can't detect it, then use an absolute benchmark only. If you can't detect the gaming, you have to use an absolute benchmark. If you can detect the gaming, you can use a relative benchmark as long as you keep your eye on it, because someone will game it.
Mm. Gary, one question I've got on this on absolute benchmarks is I've seen recently a number of companies getting very clear on the systems and the behaviors they want to get better at in their company. And then I see them building what they call as like a 5-level maturity index, where 5 is like extremely tough. It's like basically everyone owns the system and is leading it forward. What's your thoughts on those forms of benchmarks, where it's a benchmark to review the maturity of the critical systems and culture that they're looking to try to become great at?
It depends whether it's being used as a management tool or as a human development tool.
Mm.
So in the Toyota system, we use the same. So one of the things that I'll talk about in a little while is this idea of there was a question came in about how do you become the best plan? How do you get extremely low quality? And one of those things is a system. So across the Toyota company, there is 7 modules. One of those modules is production. In production, there are 7 sub-modules, and in those 7 sub-modules, there's 984 benchmark items. So the benchmark item in the Japanese system, you get 0 marks until the benchmark item is fully installed and operating. Then you get 1. How you get 2 is no further Kaizen is possible. The target is 90%. So that means you have to be achieving 2 in 80% of the benchmark measures, and you're allowed to achieve 1 in 20% of the benchmark measures. Now, when that was first put to people outside in Westerners, the Western management screamed and shouted, "You can't do that. That's too tough. You've got to encourage the Westerner," right? So in places like the USA, they made it out of 10. So the problem with making it out of 10 is, well, I'm thinking about it, so I'll give myself 2. Right? I'm doing a little bit about it, so I can give myself 5. With 5, we're pretty good, right? Whereas the Japanese system is you're either doing it or you're not. And I put that into this company in Australia, the Japanese version. So I simply said, and so the target is 90%, but we didn't start there. I just said to the employees, can we just do 1? Can we get 1 mark in every benchmark? Just, can we get this system in and operating? And the employee said, yes. So the target is 50. But of course, for example, in Australia, our safety systems are much better. So we started getting 2s. So we can get more than 50. So I can make the 55. So the target should be about 55. Yeah, that's okay. So then we get more 2s. So the target could be 60. So you don't sell 90%. You just ask them, can you do 1? Can we implement every item, 1 benchmark item? And the employees say, yeah, I can do that. If you ask them first, well, you've got to get to no Kaizen is possible, they just say, forget it. But you don't do that.
Yeah, we found that too, Gary, as you look at companies that try to get to like a level 5 out of they're typically stage maturity indexes that I see, it could take them 10 years or more to get to 5. And it can destroy some of the thinking where, like you said, it's like the absolute benchmark. It's that short interval. Let's just get to a 1 or a 1 point something.
Yeah, yeah.
But the challenge is, I guess, in the West, sometimes we can think, oh, we're giving a score out of 5. We've got to get 5 tomorrow. It's like, no, with absolute benchmarks, that doesn't happen. It's a
Well,
long journey to get there.
it's the same as I said last week in the perfect line. If you're a 2 out of 10 company, it took us 2 years, even with the capability of the Japanese and myself. It took us 2 years to get to 7.8. Even with the competency that we had, you cannot, because it's you can only go as fast as the human can grow.
Mm,
Right? The limiting factor is always the human being. Everybody talks about the technical system. Stuff the technical system. The technical system can be fixed quite quickly. The human system can't. You can only grow as fast as your humans can adapt.
mm, mm.
And
So,
as
Gary,
I
that
said,
brings.
we took in that greenfield site, we took 2 out of 10 people. And, so the problems, errors, delays, and frustrations are normal. And within 10 months, they have no problems, errors, delays, and frustrations at the customer level.
Uh,
You just explain to them what you have to do. This is all it means. So how does the system fail? Teach them how to stop the system failing. And
mm,
that's what it's all about. It's about teaching the human. This is, I use the word, if you've ever listened to John Shook, John will talk about what we call, what in the Toyota group, what you call watching the hands. When you join Toyota, the first thing they teach you to do is watch the hands, watch somebody else. The person is doing this, watch them. Just copy what they do. But at a later stage, before you get permission to change anything, you have to switch from watching the hands to training the mind. So what these tools in Toyota that I just described are about is training the mind. Right? So there's a whole, part of my learning way back when I first started this, I'm walking around the Toyota main plant, so the car assembly main plant head office in Japan with the vice president. And I'm talking about, so we're making cars and that. Oh, Gary-san. No, Gary-san. Factory is dojo. Dojo is if you know your martial arts, a dojo is a training area. So what he's telling me is, no, the purpose of the factory is not to build cars. The purpose of the factory is to teach the human mind. Right? And that's all, you don't get that lesson. That doesn't exist in lean, right? This is part of the problem with lean. It doesn't even think about like that. The factory is a dojo.
mm,
Right? You think, and I talk about things like technology development, innovation, finance development, investment development, technology development, innovation development, product development, production development. For every one of those, so technology development is a dojo. It's not about technology development, it's about training the human mind. Finance, remember, so the finance module is make money so that money is irrelevant to everyone else downstream from you. So finance is a dojo. It teaches you how to think differently. So everything in the company is actually a dojo. So you're talking about the human system. You're not talking about technical system at all. Yes, we build cars. Yes, we build whatever the product is. It doesn't matter what the product is. We're teaching the human being to think differently.
mm.
So Steve Jobs pitched it. Think different.
Yeah,
But that's
I
it.
love, I love it, Gary. Like one of the questions that came up from the group was understanding those two key systems more, which you mentioned with the human system and the technical system. And Gary, you just mentioned then that the human people system is all about, helping people think, grow, learn, develop. What advice would you give to an Australian company in relation to how to get better at that? What were the key things that you've learned and you've studied around that human system and really becoming better at our organizations being a dojo?
Uh, well, the first part of that is, part of one of the questions was, how how do you get up the right hand? How do you get up the ascending spiral curve? So if you're down in the bottom, so if you're in the descending spiral curve, you can use command and control leadership to get back up out of the death spiral. You can use command and control. If you want to go up the right hand, so up the ascending spiral curve, you cannot do that at all. It's not possible with command and control. You have to switch to this. You have to switch to this other version of the Toyota leadership model, which is about the human system. So command and control is about controlling the technical system. So you have to change completely to this whole different idea about how you manage a business. So if I talk about my time as a CEO of a Toyota Group company, I don't spend much time in the technical system at all. I spend nearly all of my time in the human system because I know that if the human system is not up to speed, then the technical system cannot possibly be up to speed. We can bring some consultant in and push the technical system up, but as soon as the consultant leaves, the technical system will just revert back to the same level as the human level. So you've got to spend all of your time. And this is why I said to you before that CEOs don't buy up the ascending curve, spiral curve, because that means that they have to give up everything that got them to where they are now. Right? So no CEO is going to do that. They got to being a CEO because of command and control. They're not going to give up command and control. That's why they don't buy the right-hand side. I've said to you before, CEOs don't buy the right-hand side. And that's the reason, because they're never going to go from, if you like, the watching the hands method to the training the mind method. And that's the biggest roadblock. And over the years, we in this country, we've never done it really well, but we at least did it better than we do now. We've actually gone way backwards in terms of developing the human, despite all of the conversation and despite all of the BS about, in lean, they talk about, I heard somebody the other day, well known in the lean fraternity around the world, commenting, and he's talking about it as a human-oriented system. And I said, you've got to be kidding me. This is a guy who's one of the gods of lean. And this guy completely doesn't understand anything because it's not a human system. It's a watching the hands method. Lean is essentially a watching the hands method. Because you think about Womack and so forth going into the company. What are they doing? They're watching what the Japanese are doing. They're not thinking about what's going on in here. They're watching what they're doing. So of course, lean is mostly a watching the hands method. So how the hell are you ever going to get to training the mind if lean is teaching the wrong thing? And that's why I've said to you that lean will never get you to, if you talk about the perfect line, lean is never going to get you to 4. It'll get you to 3. It'll get you to 3.5. It's never going to get you to 4. It's not possible.
Gary, I had an interesting aha moment on what you just said 2 days ago. I was at a company site where 4 years ago they were in a really bad place. Okay. And they wanted to do lean training. That was their answer, but we didn't do lean training. We didn't do it. But what we did is we helped them get clear on their culture and get clear on how they want to lead people. And we also got clear on a key system of connecting people to purpose and strategy. So we did do the strategy deployment system. And anyway, I've done voice of employee with them for about 4 years. And I've just seen the scores on those behaviors that they want to live and the beliefs they want to live go up and up and up. And also around a few key systems. I just did the strategy deployment system and connected tiered meetings to get faster comms going back and forth between each other and a way to eliminate some problems. And they're at this place now where their employee engagement score initially was -20, their employee net promoter score. Now their employee net promoter score is nearing 90 to 100%. And you can just see that the employees are now chomping at the bit to learn more about typical lean elements. How do we become more productive? How do we get rid of waste? How do we do this? And I was just thinking to myself, I was like, man, it was such a good call that we didn't just roll out lean training 4 years ago. But man, it's a beautiful time to do it now. Like we do it
Yep.
now, they are just going to embrace it and run with it, you know?
But you've now run into the other problem, which is now management is the block.
What's your thoughts, Gary?
When you first started, the employees were the blocking factor. Right now,
Mm,
you're going to run into a problem where the management is the blocking factor. You've now got the employees on side, and the management don't want to let go. They don't want to let control go, right? Because remember, as I said, in the Toyota system, if you're talking about the perfect line, at 8 out of 10, or 7.8 where my people are, they are smarter than me. I've been
yeah,
in this thing for 20 years. I've been doing this shit for 20 years, and they know more than I do. Mm. So, as a CEO of a Toyota Group company, you have to be comfortable with taking your hands off the steering wheel.
mm,
They know what they're doing. Let them do it. And this is really difficult to do, right? As a Western manager, it's really difficult to take your hands off the steering wheel. But that's what you have to do. If you really want to
yeah,
be successful, you've got to take your hands off the steering wheel.
yeah. Let it, and then you got to have that empowerment and ownership at the front, that real position there. Gary, I don't know your thoughts, but I've seen through the world of the technology world with Agile, which is all just built around PDCA and a lot of the work there of Tachiano and Shingo too. But I've seen that they've done well at empowering the front line because I feel like early they set one of the key principles was leaders who serve the growth, particularly of everyone around them. But also one of their key principles was to create autonomy, remove roadblocks and empowerment at the front line, small autonomous frontline teams. What's your thoughts on what's evolved there? And it's not all been good. Like there's very bad examples in that world too, but there's been some very good ones. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, you come back to things like quality circles. What's the purpose of a quality circle? Most people would say to improve quality, and that's rubbish.
Mm,
Right? If you actually improve quality, then you're just fortunate. The purpose of a quality circle is to teach the human mind, is
yeah.
to teach them how to think, how to understand why their system is doing what it's doing, how it fails, and how to fix it. So
Mm,
we used to have so when ASIN was running, we're making the door frame for the Toyota car, and we're at 7.8. Archie Cowan used to run a thing called Insights to Excellence, so a benchmarking program. Come and visit these companies. Towards the end, so he'd visit lots of companies, and towards the end of the year, he had a bit of a streak in him, and he'd say, "Well, let's chew on this one." Bring him to ASIN and chew on this. You're looking at a 7.8 out of 10 plant, and honestly, people had no idea what they were looking at.
mm,
Um, we didn't allow consultants in. One sneaked in once and asked me a question and said, this doesn't look like a lean plant because there's no charts. You realize at 8 out of 10, there's no need for charts. The human being is interacting with the machine, so they feel the machine is going off and they adjust it. Right? So if you put charts in, every chart is a flat line, zero variation. Right? So you don't disrespect your people by putting flat line charts in. So there's no charts in this place. So this consultant said, "This is not a lean plant." I said, "Thank you." He didn't get the the sarcasm in that because he was coming along as a 2 out of 10 thinker, thinking, looking at a 7.8 and having no idea what he's looking at. So it's always the difficulty of people is you can't see something that is dramatically different to where you are. And so there's no point bringing people, and that's why we used to try and get a small group, and Archie would bring along the best CEOs and best people that he thought would get it, because we know that 90%, 99% of people won't get it. They just can't conceive that the operators. So, Archie was the only person who was ever allowed into the plant without somebody watching him because he was there so often. And somebody would say to me, "Oh, Archie's here." So I would wander out to the plant and I know exactly where he is. He's standing there and he would say to me, "How the F are they doing that?" And I said, "Archie, if you're not doing it, you'll never understand it." And these people are, and I'm not kidding you, they are interacting with the machines. They are feeling the system varying and changing it before you can even measure it. And
Mm,
that's very hard to understand.
yeah.
Hard to
So
understand.
that
Even if you've seen it a few times, and I'll admit to you, as the CEO of the company, I don't understand how they do it. This is beyond my understanding. I couldn't do it. And that's why
mm,
you have to trust them. You teach these people at that level of thinking process, you just got to trust them. Just leave them alone. Let them do their thing.
mm. So they built their human capability so high and their ability to understand the machines, the problems, the challenges, how to think, and then really they just were tuned up to run that system so beautifully.
Yep, they run the factory themselves. We taught them the systems comes in the door, the system, the parts go out the door. Everything in there you control. No manager can tells you what to do. You run the system inside the plant, inside the doors. And they
Mm,
won at 7.8 out of 10.
wow. Gary, what on the technical system side of things, what do you feel is important for organizations to focus on that technical side? Like the human side is critical, and we got to build that ownership and capability and empowerment at the front line. But on the technical system, what do you believe are critical elements of that technical system to consider improving?
Yes, that's difficult because you're talking about one of the ways you need to understand Japanese. Japanese is a very difficult language to learn because it's contextual. And what I mean by that is for a Westerner, it's better to understand Japanese as a form of continuum, right? So there's a direct translation on the left, and there's the what the Japanese is thinking on the right. And when you're listening to a Japanese, you're never sure where on that line he's talking about, right? And one of the examples from that is the word Kaizen. So there are actually three different versions of what the word Kaizen mean, right? So on that continuum. On the left is what an individual operator will do in the Toyota plant, and that's what's called the kanji character. So these are the little pictogram type words. So that's the minimum version. The next level is what a team leader or the lower management will do, and that's what's called the katakana. So the katakana, if you know, is the brushstrokes type Japanese language. So the katakana is a more higher level of Kaizen, and they're both, if you like, technical system ones. And then the third one is a human system one. So when an operator is talking, he's talking about the kanji version, but he might also be talking about the katakana version. When you're talking to a middle manager, he's normally talking about the katakana version, but he might also be talking about the kanji version. So if you're listening to E.G. Toyota talk, is E.G. talking about the katakana version, the kanji version, or the human version? You don't know because you don't understand the context of what they're trying to say. So that's one of the difficulties you have with anything to do with the understanding the Japanese. So if you want to work on the technical system, you need some really good tools. And the problem with the tools in Lean is that they are not structured. People have, because they've been around for so long, people have learned a bit of structure. But because Womack and so forth went into the Toyota plants and learnt the teaching the hands method, they don't understand how to turn that into a structure. So there's a bit of structure in Lean, but it's around teaching the hands, not about training the mind. So there's no real structure in Lean. So if you wanted to do, and let me give you an example of what we do. So how do we get our people to 7.8 out of 10? One of the tools we use is a thing called the QA network, right? So the QA network of the door frame is about 1.5 to 2 meters high and about 3 to 4 meters long. Right? Now, if I show that to you, or to a 2 out of 10 person, it's just total overwhelm. right? But to the operators, and the operators fill this thing in, not the management, right? So the operators on the line are actually doing this work. So they can see the complexity. They understand the complexity because they've constructed it. So let me give you an example of what I did with a company. When we put the QA network in, I didn't give them anything, any form from Toyota, right? Or the Toyota group. I made a simple A3 size version. And I didn't even put it in, so into the work, it's an Excel spreadsheet. I just drew it on a whiteboard. So down the left-hand side is this, let's say, the 6 steps of the process. So there are 6 boxes. Across the top of the page, there's 4, if you like, sections. The first section is simply the item number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, a title, so a description, and a picture of what that process step looks like. Then you move to the second box, and these are the standard ways. So the top of the thing is, how do we control the process? So the second box, or the second grouping, is how do we control it? So process control plans, standard operating procedure, one-page lessons, whatever it is, right? Including an RPN, right? A risk profile number. So what's the probability? What's the severity? What's the detection? And an RPN. The third box is, how do we stop making a problem? And the fourth box is, how do we stop passing on a problem? Because in Toyota, making a problem isn't the problem. Passing it on is the crime, right? So what you're teaching the human being to do is look at the process steps. How do we control those process steps? Here's the standard stuff we do. Here's how we specifically control this product. And here's how we stop passing any problem on. Because the key is to not pass the problem on. If you have a problem, that's fine. Find it. Don't ever pass it on. So, and all you do is, so I would just draw that. And then they turn it into an A3 size spreadsheet. And by the time, so 6 weeks later, I come back and it's an A2 because we need a Pokioki device. So add 3 columns, right? Oh, we need this, add 3 columns. Add 3 columns, right? And so the thing just grows, and it grows this way. So, we've got 6 steps, but actually, because of the control process, we need to divide step 4 into 2 parts. So it becomes 4A and 4B. So we add another down. So the thing grows down and the thing grows across. And so by the time I left and, never went back, they were up at an A1 size. They just slowly learned how this thing works. Very simple. Don't confuse them. Very simple stuff. Just let them learn it. And they learn, oh, well, I need a Pokioki device. What do I do? Add a column. And so after a little while, it's not my sheet, right? That's why I don't give them sheets. I draw it on a whiteboard because somebody's going to rub the whiteboard off. Now it's up to them. They will take it and they run with it. And that's the best way to teach your people. You're fixing the technical system, but you're teaching the people how to control the system.
Mm. And I particularly would understand, Gary, that's with very much frontline leaders and frontline employees who are doing that analysis and going through that and planning it out and creating it and then owning it to take it forward. Like, Gary, in that organization, who are the people putting that together, like forming that up once you leave? Who are the people involved in that conversation?
Well, the team leaders. I teach that to the team leaders. So I teach them how this works, and then they essentially, so somebody else, somebody obviously in the office makes the format for them, but then they run it. So it's just like, so the QA network is run by the team leaders and operators. Managers are only ever observers. Managers never run it. They can observe, but the team leaders run it.
Yeah, that team leader role is a critical one, isn't it? Because their behavior and their thinking casts onto the frontline employees massively too, doesn't it? But then I guess the manager's attitude and behavior casts onto the team leaders in a big way. It's like a cascade of behavioral and belief impact, isn't it?
Sort of. You go back to the rules in what I call the architecture. And one of the rules in the architecture is once you teach the human being, the management are not allowed to intervene. They're not
Mm.
allowed to interfere. Right, so this is why once you get them to 7.8, leave them alone, let them go. They're smarter than I am, so there's no point in me trying to come along to a meeting and try and be smart because they'll just outsmart me.
Yeah. Gary, the challenge I see at the minute in Australian industry is that a lot of companies I walk into, you'd go in there and an employee will be shown a work instruction off of an iPad, and then from there it's saved on SharePoint that they can't get to it unless they go to a computer somewhere. You've got no idea whether a machine's been looked after or not. Typically, machines are run to failure. That's where we're at in a lot of cases at the moment. Like
Yep,
they're,
which is hiding the problem. And this is why, so, let me give you an example. We're running a plant at 7.8. The quality auditors come along, and what does the quality auditor do? Oh, show me the standard work charts in the computer.
yeah,
There is no standard work chart in the computer. It's on the assembly line. You have to go out and look at the line. Yeah, I understand there's one out on the line, but I want to see the master standard work chart, the one that's in the computer. There is no master. It's on the line. They're changing the bloody standard work 6 times a day. We'd have to employ 2 people just to run between the lines to keep the bloody paperwork up to date. The only one is on the line. Now and again, because it's got they handwrite stuff on it. Now and again, we have to bring it in and somebody polishes it up and puts it back out there. And as soon as it goes back out there, they start changing it again. And the quality, we had to actually end up getting a special quality auditor who used to work in the aircraft industry, so he understood what we were talking about. Because the most of the quality auditors had no idea. Oh,
a lot
it's
of them
working
don't
in the
even go to the
computer.
floor.
You've got to be controlling it. How can you put it out there? You have to control the system. I said, be controlling the system, you idiot. But anyway, this is part of the problem you have is, even the quality auditors didn't understand what was going on. They couldn't comprehend that
I,
these people are so good at what they do that they're changing standard work 6 times a day. And therefore you
mm,
put it in the computer. There's no point. And the point of the Toyota system, and if you ever visit these sort of things, we had boards out in the factory, and those boards are really about the human side of it. And they didn't understand what they're looking at. So they're trying to think about, they're looking at it from a 2 out of 10 perspective and trying to look at an 8 out of 10, and they have no idea what's going on. No idea. So, that's why last time, remember, so in the one I sent you before, the worksheet I gave you had bits missing. And the reason I do that is because if I send you a perfect sheet, it has no value to you. But when you write in there, the perfect line, I've got to write practical against 8. I've got to write minimum acceptable against 4. I've got to write the title human above system, technical above system. So when you do that, you own it. You start taking ownership. So when
yeah,
you put things in a computer, you're hiding them. And if you hide things from people, guess what happens to the human capability? Zip.
yep.
Well,
And it all
I had a
counts for what
conversation.
happened.
Let me just expand on that. I had a conversation with a guy from a soldier from the SAS. This is one of the top SAS guys. And I'm talking to him about training. So I'm interested in the human system. So what do you do for training? How do you get to this? How do you get to the level you do? And he talks about training and he says, the reason we do this is this. And he put his hand up, about 2 feet above the table. And he said, when the first bullet fired, this is what happens. Bang. Your competency goes to the floor instantly. He said, why we train? Because it comes back like this. And that's
Yeah,
why,
yeah,
so you understand that if you don't train your people, when the shit happens, they don't come back.
yeah,
Why do you train your people? Because when the shit happens, sure, it affects them, but they will quickly recover. If you don't
yeah,
train them, it'll never come back. The shit will
yeah,
fall to the floor and it will stay there.
yeah. Oh, it's amazing topic, Gary, that you brought there. Tim, I want to open it up to a group for a question. Like everyone, what questions have you got here? Because Gary's covering an amazing topic when you think of achieving excellence here that is different to a lot of the thinking that typically goes around. What questions? Feel free to put into chat or come off mute. and ask a question. There's got to be some buzzing around your mind at the moment. Hey, Wade.
Gary. Hey, Gary. Thanks, Brad.
Hi.
Amazing topic. All these things are lighting up in my head. So thanks very much, Gary. Question I have is, how do I get really clear on the shift that I need to make to get people on the right-hand side? How do I get that? What do I focus on to be that person that can take an organization where it is, -3, -4 to, all right, let's go this, and not really having experience at 7.8.
As I said last time, you can't start on the left-hand side. You need to start with Russell Ackoff. So you need to start understanding systems, because the key point is you need to understand what's missing in your system. So the reason you're where you are is because of what's not there, not because of what is there. Right? So you need to understand your system. So what's missing in your system? Oh, I don't have this control. I don't have this control. I don't use pokeokis properly. I don't do this. So what's going wrong? You need to understand the technical system, and that'll tell you what you need to do with your human system. So the failure of the technical system tells you what to do with the human system. So study Russell Ackoff. And I mean, I was talking to Brad just before. So what you should do with Ackoff is there's about, on YouTube, there's a whole lot of them, right? But there's about half a dozen really good ones. And you should just download them if you can, or just binge watch them at some point. Set aside a couple of hours and just binge watch him. So if you watch them individual days, you'll lose the message. But if you binge watch them, you'll get the message of what he's really saying. And then just use that. So how does my system fail? Start asking that question. How does this system fail? Or what does that mean on the human side? So you've got to always work with the technical system first. You cannot work with the human system first. It's not about, that's why I said in Toyota, you start with the watching the hands method, the technical system. Just do what everyone else does. Don't think, right? But at some point we have to change that to, well, now you have to start thinking, because otherwise we're never going to get to 8 out of 10. You without that switch. So if you think it as a spiral, so in Toyota, this is called the DNA. You've heard the term Toyota's DNA. That's the spiral. Start watching the hands, teach them, training the mind. That's how you get up there. That's how you get up the ascending spiral curve. You've got to switch from how do you start teaching the people, watching the hands, training the mind. How do you do that? You've got to show them how the system fails. So that's why I said that the example that I had of the case study of the microbiology company, draw the map. What does the perfect system look like? What does our system look like? Oh, shit. What are all the holes? How does it fail? And then you start, and then you'll start, people will start asking you, so how do I fix my system? We know there's 90 weeks. Now, how the hell is there 90 weeks worth of problems, errors, delays, and frustrations? Because the system's failing. The technical system's failing. So we just started on the right-hand side. We didn't work on the left-hand side, on the human side at all. We just worked on the right-hand side. And gradually they understood, in order to fix that, I got to fix this. In order to fix, I got to fix this. And it's just like a little ladder. You just up. And I can give you an example of that. When we started, so as I said in ASIN, it was a greenfield site. So the machinery that came out of Japan was, 70 years worth of acquired knowledge of how you make door frames, right? I have 2 out of 10 people. How the hell do you get 2 out of 10 people to run 8 out of 10 machinery? Well, you dumb the machine down. We didn't push the people up. We dumbed the machine down to their level. And then as they lifted, we took the dumbing out. They lifted, we took the dumbing out. We lifted, we took the dumbing out. You got to have just a little gap between the human and the technical system. When they have it, you lift that, you lift that. And so you got to start with the technical system. You cannot start with the human system. I mean, I know there's lots of people out there telling you that you should, but it's bullshit. Until they understand how and why their system fails, you won't get them to do anything. Teach them how their system fails. So do it, as I said, in that microbiology, what does the perfect line looks like? No problems, errors, delays. So what would the system look like? So do the customer line. Our product goes, and then we ship it. What's the customer line? What are the things that feed into it? So an Ishikawa diagram. What does the perfect line look like? Do what your current process is. What's the difference? Well, 4 or 5 hours. So what's causing the 4 or 5 hours that we don't understand? Because the problem is you don't understand what the 4 or 5 hours is. They don't understand what the 4 or 5 hours is. So first, get them to recognize there's 4 or 5 hours of problems, errors, delays, and frustrations in the system. Oh, so now what? Remove it. Remove red, mark it red. Remove red. It just became a catch cry in that company. Remove red. What are you doing? I'm removing red. Well, you just became a catch cry. So what they're doing is they're slowly understanding how the system fails. In the long term, everything you do is about how the system fails. Because until you understand how a system fails, you cannot possibly design a system that doesn't fail.
Well,
Key to it is that, right? You cannot design a system that doesn't fail until you understand why systems fail. And to understand why they fail, you have to understand how they work or how they're supposed to work.
And then the trick, I guess, Gary, then is make sure you then drift to the human system
Of
as you
course,
go forward.
You've always got to move, so you're doing the watching the hands type stuff. So you're doing the technical system, but as soon as you can, transfer that into the training the mind.
Yep. And when you're winning, when you're getting that ownership and that capability at the front line. Gary and everyone.
Brad, when they tell you to piss off, you know you're winning.
I love it. Well, on that note, everyone, I'm conscious of time. And Gary, thank you so much, mate, again. Your knowledge is amazing. Everyone, thank you for attending. And we will put this up on the podcast again. And Gary, just one final shout out, mate. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. You've given me amazing insights. And thanks for helping us create a better future, mate.
No problem. Thanks you, everyone.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, everyone. Bye for now. What a great episode. Remember, you can visit our website, enterpriseexcellencepodcast.com, to download resources and tools that Gary has kindly given us, together with many other guests throughout the history. Please like, subscribe, and share this podcast to help others gain insights and create a better future also. There were 2 key takeaways for me from this episode. The firstly was the systemic approach that Gary takes to transforming companies, particularly the discussion around really looking at that gap between what the flow of the system currently is and the waste in there versus the perfect line. And then using the Ishikawa diagram and root cause analysis to really pinpoint what is the root cause of this waste that's in the system. Such a simple, structured approach to helping a company truly achieve amazing things, just like the case study that Gary provided. The second key takeaway is just the knowledge that Gary Stewart has from his life history, which is so great to be able to capture and share with everyone on this show. And I've gained so much from past, current, and future conversations I know I'm going to have with Gary. Thank you so much, sir, for everything you have done and continue to do to help us create a better future. Bye from now.